When the bitter winters of Europe and the damp chill of underground bunkers closed in during the Second World War, soldiers didn't have the luxury of central heating or even dry shelter. Yet in the darkness below ground, warmth meant survival, not comfort. A few degrees of heat could prevent frostbite, allow weapons to function properly, and keep morale from collapsing. That's where one of the most ingenious wartime improvisations emerged: the oil drum stove. Built from scrap, powered by scavenged fuel, and refined through field innovation, this simple yet rugged creation became the lifeline of countless bunkers across the eastern and western fronts. When survival demanded heat from nothing but waste, by 1942 soldiers on both sides were battling not just enemies, but the elements. Temperatures in some eastern front sectors dropped to -40 degrees, freezing rifles and rations alike. Standard-issue stoves were either too heavy or too scarce to supply every dugout, so men turned to what they had: empty oil drums, grease tins, and salvage piping. The beauty of the oil drum stove lay in its simplicity. An empty fuel drum was cut open, a crude door added, and a length of pipe or exhaust tubing turned into a chimney. The design wasn't uniform. It evolved based on terrain, available materials and necessity. Germans, Soviets, and Allied forces all developed their own variations. And despite the makeshift origins, these stoves performed far better than most military-issued heaters. What made these stoves so effective was their ability to retain and radiate heat efficiently in confined underground spaces. Soldiers would coat the outside of the drum with mud or clay to insulate it and prevent sparks from igniting bunker walls. Some even lined the base with sand and gravel to hold residual heat long after the fire died. In freezing trenches and subterranean command posts, this crude craftsmanship meant life continued when the cold could have easily brought it to a halt. How a single drum became a lifeline for entire units. The principle behind the WWII oil drum stove was simple thermodynamics combined with battlefield ingenuity. By cutting a small air vent near the bottom and adding a chimney vent on top, soldiers created a draft that allowed the fire to burn cleaner and hotter. Grease, diesel, or even kerosene were poured into the bottom to act as fuel. In regions where oil was scarce, soldiers fed the stove with wood, coal, or dried animal dung. Over time, some units refined the design further by installing a baffle plate inside the drum, a scrap metal divider that forced hot air to circulate before exiting through the pipe. This made the stove more fuel efficient and prevented all the heat from escaping too quickly. One of the most remarkable examples came from the Soviet front lines, where soldiers repurposed 200-litre fuel barrels into stoves capable of heating dugouts large enough for 10 to 12 men. They would bury the stove partially into the ground, using the earth as an insulator. The exhaust pipe was routed upward through a narrow shaft that doubled as an air vent, effectively turning the bunker into a pressurized heating chamber. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, Allied troops stationed in long-term defensive positions made similar use of 55-gallon drums, often mounting them horizontally and attaching simple stovetop grates to heat rations. How you can apply this lost design today in survival or off-grid living? The oil drum stove's brilliance lies in its practicality, and that's why it's still relevant for survivalists, off-grid builders and homesteaders. Constructing one today follows nearly the same principles soldiers used 80 years ago. Start with a steel drum, ideally one that previously held non-toxic material. Cut a small access door at the bottom to feed in wood or fuel. Add a flue pipe that runs vertically for proper ventilation. To make it safer for confined spaces, you can pack the sides with clay or sand to reduce external heat and prevent accidental fires. One practical modern adaptation is the rocket oil drum stove, where an L-shaped pipe system feeds air directly to the combustion chamber. This method, inspired by wartime efficiency, burns hotter and cleaner, producing minimal smoke, a critical feature for staying concealed or conserving fuel in emergencies. Off-grid enthusiasts can also use the drum stove for cooking or heating water by welding a flat plate on top, or attaching a secondary pipe coil for a makeshift water heater. The forgotten ingenuity behind wartime innovation. The WWII oil drum stove represents more than just field engineering. It's a lesson in resourcefulness under pressure. When industrial supply lines broke down, soldiers relied on creativity, teamwork, and experimentation. These makeshift heaters turned battlefield waste into warmth and light, helping men endure long nights of shelling, snow, and fear. What's striking is how these same designs later influenced post-war civilian life. Many returning soldiers replicated the concept at home, especially in rural Europe and the American Midwest, where fuel and heating materials were still rationed. In some cases, these repurposed stoves became permanent fixtures in barns and workshops, proving that wartime necessity can lead to lasting, practical design. For modern survivalists, reenactors and history buffs, the oil drum stove isn't just a relic, it's a working piece of knowledge. Understanding how to make and operate one safely could be invaluable in crisis situations where heat, cooking or sterilization are essential. It's a perfect example of how old-world ingenuity still outperforms modern convenience when stripped down to the essentials. Why this forgotten piece of Wartime survival deserves to be remembered. Every rusted oil drum, buried in an old bunker or found in a museum, tells a story, not of destruction, but of endurance. These stoves kept troops alive when their surroundings tried to kill them. They were symbols of defiance against the cold, improvisation against scarcity, and survival against all odds. For anyone interested in the history of resilience, this humble stove is proof that human inventiveness thrives even in the harshest conditions. If this kind of ingenuity fascinates you, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning for more deep dives into forgotten WWII field innovations that shaped not only the battlefield, but the world we live in today. Share this with someone who loves uncovering the real, functional history behind the myths. Because the next time you see an old oil drum, you might be looking at one of the unsung heroes of wartime survival.